And give the call to the honourable member for Bass.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, let's be clear, climate change is real. We must do what we reasonably can to cut emissions while taking advantage of the economic opportunities that exist for our country. As pointed out in my address in reply speech last week, caring for our environment is intrinsic to Liberal Party values. In our own statement of beliefs, we say we believe in preserving Australia's natural beauty and the environment for future generations. This is simply what I seek to do, and I'm joined by Liberal state governments in pursuing more ambitious emission reduction targets. I'm proud to live in a state that's a leader in renewable energy. The government announced in 2021 that it will legislate a more ambitious emissions reduction target with net zero emissions by 2030, a feat already achieved in the last 6 of the past 7 years. They're joined by our counterparts in Victoria and New South Wales, with targets of 50% reduction by 2030. I'm not working against where we are heading in my home state of Tasmania or where we need to head as a country. It's just common sense, and like it or not, it's what our nation voted for in the recent election. I understand that I come to this from an advantageous position, living in a state that has long had one of the greenest energy supplies in Australia. In fact, the city of Launceston in my northern Tasmanian electorate of Bass was the first in the country to be lit by hydropower when the Duck Reach Power Station opened in 1895. 125 years later, in November 2020, Tasmania became the first Australian state and one of just a handful of jurisdictions worldwide to be wholly powered by renewable electricity. Nor do I suggest that policy and legislation as critical as this should not be scrutinised to the nth degree. That's the very reason why we're here. Yet the so-called climate wars and ideology around climate change persist, and I share the frustrations of so many in our community who just want to see the debate and fight end and get on with it. I know many of my colleagues are representing the views of their communities who have generational employment in the coal industry. And as a Tasmanian, I've seen firsthand the devastating impact of what happened to our state when the forestry industry was ripped to pieces, devastating individuals, families, the economy and the community for a long time. And it's only in recent years that we've begun to rebuild. However, I do believe that there is an inevitability as to where we are heading as a country. But there is time for a just transition if we accept the reality. If not now, when? In my own backyard of Georgetown is the Bell Bay Industrial Precinct, which produces 59% of Tasmania's manufacturing exports. The local aluminium smelter has long been the backbone of this precinct. The smelter first opened in 1955 and the town has grown on the back of it, with generations of families employed at the smelter. As the former mayor of the town and now federal representative, I certainly have a strong understanding of what it would mean for the smelter to suddenly close shop, as it employs hundreds of direct jobs and more than 1,000 indirectly. The long-term future of the smelter was secured earlier this year after Rio Tinto signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Tasmanian Government, which includes Rio Tinto agreeing to prepare a business case for the production of hydrogen on site, with the aim of replacing existing supplies of fossil gas. It is this forward thinking that is creating a brighter, cleaner and more economically secure future for Bell Bay and the greater northern Tasmanian community. By accepting what the future may hold and doing all you can to prepare for it, ensures that when the time inevitably comes, the sky does not fall in. It's this recognition that saw the establishment of the Bell Bay Advanced Manufacturing Zone, an industry-based economic development group born out of a desire by businesses in the region for better collaboration and to grow the region's capabilities by supporting existing businesses, encouraging investment and promoting the benefits of the region as a place to live and work. Recognising the threats and opportunities that lay ahead has seen the area and local industries embrace the development of a green hydrogen industry. And after many years of consultation with local industry, key stakeholders and local, state and federal government, I announced $70 million for a green hydrogen hub in Bell Bay in late April, a commitment matched by Labor. The traditional skills of workers at the smelter are also being utilised by emerging industries that are setting up in Tasmania, attracted to our renewable power grid. Companies like Thermos, who have built an ultra-low emissions and high-performance cloud and are hiring highly skilled workers across several fields, including power systems. And though, of course, there will never be a whole consensus on the matter in our northern Tasmanian community, I've met with and heard from countless organisations and individuals who are truly passionate about seeing the government of the day take more action on climate change, and have specifically asked me to do what I can in the role that I have to bring about this much needed change. And the people of Bass put their trust in me to represent their views. The Launceston Chamber of Commerce is over 170 years old and has consistently adapted and advanced causes in the best interests of the local business community. In 2020, the Chamber adopted a climate change policy favouring initiatives that support a reduction in carbon emissions that benefit Tasmanian businesses and the broader community, including the creation of new enterprises and initiatives that contribute to carbon emissions reduction. The last thing business needs is ongoing uncertainty around legislated carbon future, President Andrew Pitt expressed to me recently. While the Chamber would like to see a more ambitious target than 43%, Andrew went on to say this is a starting point that should help Australian industries confidently transition to a low-carbon future and which will provide our region of Tasmania with competitive advantage. For local Beaconsfield farmer Ben Hooper, he's concerned that parts of the country will become unproductive and unlivable if further action isn't taken to address climate change. But he's also pragmatic when considering what financial impact it may have on Australians. We really have to decarbonise, but it's going to cost us lifestyle and money. What are we willing to pay for it? For Northern Tasmanian winemaker Stuart Byrne, he has witnessed the effect a warmer climate is having on many of the established Australian viticultural regions in warmer climates. They're becoming marginal. The increased growing season temperatures have resulted in lower fruit quality, compressed harvest periods and a subsequent greater pressure on winery infrastructure, Mr Byrne said. Here in Tasmania, where the prediction models have us been the least affected of the viticultural regions from a climate change perspective, we're still experiencing challenges. Fire and the subsequent effect of smoke damage on fruit has resulted in significant losses in 3 of the past 10 years, and dry lightning strikes are a relatively new phenomenon in Tasmania. Tasmania also has limited resources. The eastern side of Tasmania, where the majority of vineyards are planted, is dry. As the climate continues to change and as more vineyards and farming operations move to Tasmania, it will put further strain on our resources. We then need to have discussions on whether vineyards are the best use for this increasingly valuable land. So the threat of climate change on the wine industry is multifaceted, both in the short and long term. For a state with a world-class and established wine industry, this should be startling. Mr Deputy Speaker, I've witnessed parts of the debate around the issue of climate change patronised by some as being a young, lefty, elite issue, and I absolutely dispute this characterisation. This issue transcends age, gender, political affiliation, religious beliefs and socio-economic circumstances. In the Northern Tasmanian community, I've met with and received emails and letters from local school and uni students to Baptist ministers, doctors, retired teachers, business leaders, grandparents, pensioners from the left, from the right, all of whom believe this is an issue not one of left or right, but is where the future of our country needs to be, solely at the centre. Just last week, I received an email from a lifelong 70-year-old Liberal supporter who wants to see our party and our country move ahead with greater action on climate change, and he's not alone. To this gentleman and the thousands of other Northern Tasmanians who've reached out to me via email or through my community survey and identified climate change as one of their most significant concerns, I have heard you. I've spent a lot of time deciding how to proceed after reviewing Labor's legislation, and I believe there are issues with the Consequential Amendments Bill, so I will not be supporting this due to my concerns over the impact it may have on important infrastructure projects, for example. But I will be supporting Labor's primary bill. At the end of the day, it's important to me that when I'm back in my own community, I'm able to sincerely say that I used the opportunity afforded to me with the power of my vote to stand up for what they want and need and to move on from this debate. I've had incredibly constructive discussions with opposition leader about my views and that of the party on this issue, and while there is much that we do agree on, I believe he understands why I've made this decision. I have respect for him and he has my support as our party formulates our own plan to combat climate change while supporting the Australian economy. However, while that happens, it is important that we do move forward and we act now and not delay until the eve of the next election.